This is a clouds weather alert.
Good late Thursday or late Friday, meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, giving you a look at those temperatures across the region at about 1:30 or so in the morning. North Florida, South Georgia, 60s, the upper range of that, or the lower 70s, predominant story. But there are some spots that are a little bit warmer. I know we do have somewhat of a fog threat around, so we got to be mindful of that here as we're tracking things. We have those storms toward the Midwest, toward the center of the country there, as we're looking at things. And we're just going to have to continue to track that threat here in toward the days to come. But locally, we're going to stay pretty dry. We do have some drought concerns still, which I'll get to in a moment as we're tracking things overall. I know where we're at here east of Stark right now. We're sitting at 68 degrees, so that's kind of giving you an idea. Pretty warm here for this time of night as we're looking at things. Last night we were cooling off a little bit more, but now starting to get a little bit more of those warmer temperatures in even the nighttime hours, but it's going to be downright hot. Very, very hot. Maybe record breaking highs here on some of those days as we're looking at things based on just the overall data set here that we can look at in the weather world. I mean, it is definitely a storyline as we're tracking things. The potential for daily record highs to be set locally in some spots here. That is something that you can see from time to time, obviously, but in mid-May, we're talking about mid-90s, maybe some spots getting toward those upper 90s here, depending on exactly where you're located. Now, I do want to tell you, though, the national threat of the, tornado concern here as we look ahead. There's going to be more tornado watches, more tornado warnings. We had a bunch toward like Wisconsin, Michigan there on that Thursday. And now on that Friday, things are going to be even more significant. And we're waiting for the latest update from the Storm Prediction Center for the day one outlook. And maybe we'll get some others here as well. But there's a chance, that it could get upgraded to a higher risk. We'll find out here soon for areas like in Missouri, which is very rare. Already a moderate risk as for wind there. The biggest concern with that. But hail's going to be an issue too. So we just got to be mindful there as we're tracking things overall here in the Weather Center. I know another interesting storyline before we kind of, I'll wait here for the latest to come in from the Storm Prediction Center. I may not wait too long. Let me just go ahead and go with it and give you the update at the end as that comes in here. If, it does take a bit. But locally, one thing I will note here that's kind of intriguing, and let me see if we can pull it up on here. You see a little bit of the green. There's an indication, in this overall pattern where you have some different types of atmospheric parameters. Tropospheric ducting, not something we talk about very much on here, but I know just extreme values in regards to that here. So like myself, year-round Stark already on my antenna. Now it's a pretty good one, but picking up Montgomery TV station and a Dothan TV station, and I know that didn't mean a lot to most people, but that's over 200 miles away. Both of those transmitters are, so that's pretty impressive. The atmospheric parameters here tonight, really allowing for that from time to time. I mean, sometimes things can be so extreme, you're not going to get consistency, but interesting to see there. Something we don't talk about much. I know a lot of people aren't really maybe following along with stuff like that, but I thought that was kind of intriguing there with meteorology and with, some other just things, maybe meteorology folks, not as many into that, but other folks, that aren't into meteorology. It does have a meteorology connection though. So as we're going ahead and looking at things here, as we're looking at this map right now, I will go ahead and broaden the view a little bit, and then I'll broaden it a lot. And you can see these temperatures toward Texas here. They've had even worse heat, triple-digit heat over toward the Lone Star State as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here, well, in toward the weather center. Let me go ahead and take off the temperatures. We'll go ahead and say that there was an enhanced risk toward part of Michigan there. Not really verified tonight. A bunch of warnings over there. A bunch of tornado warnings right now. There's a severe thunderstorm warning for the Detroit metro area. We're talking about 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts and penny-sized hail, but there's also some recrotation in here. So tornado watch continuing for a little longer over there as well. And then as you look up toward the north here, you see This is in effect to warning severe thunderstorm warning to at 2:15 a.m. For areas as we're getting up there around Croswell, Michigan, Harbor Beach. But as you get down here, Port Huron, you see some stuff offshore around Detroit. There's severe thunderstorm warning for central Wayne County until 2 a.m. So you don't see that very much at downtown Detroit. Some severe weather potentially moving on through right now there in southeast Michigan. So that's a storyline there for sure. As we're tracking things, as we're monitoring the latest data coming on in here. I know they generally, when they have storms like this, have power problems in Michigan. I haven't looked. I'm going to look right now. They're having problems. Over 250,000 folks in the dark right now, according to PowerOut.us. In the state of Michigan, Wisconsin, about 36,000 or so. Illinois, over 71,000. And Indiana, over 88,000. So definitely an impact. And Friday could be worse. There's a chance in Missouri and maybe even in the Kentucky there. Friday could be much worse in terms of the threat for strong tornadic activity. We really got to pay attention there as we're tracking the overall situation. We're going to be really anxiously awaiting that latest update from the Storm Prediction Center as that comes on in here in just a little bit. A very big deal as we're tracking things. I know as we're looking at the overall meteorology, I know look how cool it is up in northern parts of North Dakota right now, lower 40s. They were seeing much warmer temperatures, hot temperatures earlier on in the pattern. Now that cool air trying to come in, you have a low pressure involved, and that's a big catalyst and why we're seeing all these problems. I mean, that's the pressure of a hurricane there over areas there around Valley City in North Dakota, Fargo there, the center just south of Grand Forks. So, again, just continuing to track this overall meteorological scenario here. Definitely have a lot of winds with that, just, with the pressure pattern itself over there. But as we look toward Michigan, you're in that severe slot with things here, and it definitely is a cause for concern. And as we watch, the track of this system, we'll have a threat. We'll have another threat as we track here of another system coming on in as we look ahead. It's going to be a very active pattern. That's why we're in alert mode. We're not in alert mode for the local heat. We don't have excessive heat warnings in play or anything like that. Still can be deadly though. Don't leave, obviously. It's so important to not leave, somebody in the back seat like a young child. Because it can be deadly real quick in this type of heat. But our logo's red because of the national severe threat being so extreme as we look ahead toward, especially later on this Friday here, as we're tracking things, as we're monitoring things here in toward the weather center. I mean, just kind of trying to give you guys the latest here on this picture, our continental U.S., our 48 states here. You can kind of see what's going on. I have in winter modes, but not really necessarily seeing wintry weather for the most part. We have some in toward Colorado, but as we go ahead and switch it back to the other mode here, the Doppler perspective. Again, anxiously awaiting the new update for the Storm Prediction Center. That was your day one. That technically goes to 8 a.m. Granted, a lot of that's further east there, within that, past the enhanced risk per se. As we're looking ahead in the timeline, but we're going to really have to pay attention toward the, outlook ahead. Let's go ahead and just continue along to give you guys the latest information here. I know you got to drink plenty of water locally. This pattern, I know we've seen it before. You have so much heat down south, then you have just tornadoes up north, in the central part of the country here. So we really got to be paying attention as we're tracking things. Let me go ahead and go to our other source here. The latest outlook's not necessarily in yet. We're going to see what the day 2 outlook, assuming we don't get anything in the next few seconds, which will update automatically on this screen. But on the other screen, I have to do a couple things. But we're going to go ahead and pull this on in here. We're going to go ahead and pull this on in toward our source here as we're looking, because the way this is here with the different data points and the like. So this is the risk that they already had in play, a moderate 4 out of 5 risk. And you'll be able to see here, tornadoes 3 out of 5, but that's very significant to have the Hatch theory that big, Louisville, Kentucky, there's some concern for them. Cincinnati, Ohio, Evansville, Indiana, Bowling Green, Kentucky, Paducah, Kentucky, Cape Girardeau, Missouri, Perryville, Missouri, talking about St. Genevieve, Missouri, Carbondale, Illinois, Chester, Illinois. You kind of get the idea here. Got to really be paying attention with all this. Poplar Bluff, Missouri. Just trying to name a lot of these different areas that could be in danger. You see the wind risk here, 45%. So you could have hurricane force gusting here, even if you don't have a tornado. Hail risk pretty significant as well. Could have baseball size hail, not out of the question. That could be wind driven in some cases, which would cause a lot of damage here as we look ahead in toward the timeline. As we go to the Saturday picture with things, you see a hatch area for areas in Arkansas and Texas there. Even, our far northern fringes, even though we have a very low rain chance overall, our far northern South Georgia County area, they're under a marginal 1 out of 5 risk. That's unique for sure, because most of it is not going to see rain on Saturday, but we could have an isolated severe storm in our far northern counties on Saturday. Yes, we see a risk of severe weather toward New York City and Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Richmond, Raleigh on that Saturday. Then as we get toward that Sunday here, this is going to be your day 3 here, we're seeing a little bit right now, day 4, Oklahoma City, Moore, Norman here. You have areas of Lawton involved here in Oklahoma on that Sunday night. Wichita, Kansas, you have a severe risk. Got to be really careful. Colby and McCook there as you get Colby to Kansas, McCook, Nebraska. You see Wichita Falls in Texas, and then as we get out there toward Monday, Moore and Norman and Oklahoma City. You have Tulsa there. You have Wichita. You have Kansas City. You have Topeka. You have Lincoln. St. Joseph, Missouri's in here as well. So, gotta be really cautious and careful and stay in tune for those latest updates. Excuse me. It's gonna be a busy stretch, possibly, depending on how big of a deal these storms become nationally. Not quite big enough for the Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota threats there to come in. Live coverage there on that Thursday, but a big local story for those folks. But at points, these will become bigger national storylines, no doubt. As you get toward Tuesday here, you see St. Louis, Missouri. Another risk for you guys. It's like, we have a risk today for that Friday. We don't know the magnitude of Tuesday as well yet. But St. Louis and Little Rock and areas there, Northeast Texas. You have Eastern Oklahoma, Kansas City, Missouri. Now I'm bouncing around some, but Cape Girardeau, Missouri, Carbondale, Illinois, Springfield area, so in Illinois as well. So it's going to be an active stretch here, my friends. You got to make sure you stay in tune for the very latest. So let me go ahead and switch back over to the graphics here, as we're giving you guys the very latest information here. Just trying to keep you guys informed on what's going on as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things here in toward the weather center. So I know when there's a tornado warning in play, that means a tornado has been detected using radar or spotted. You want to try to avoid seeking shelter in a mobile home. Get inside a sturdy building, put as many walls between you and the outside as possible. Really, a basement's the best place in areas that have them, assuming there's not major flooding going on, and then protect yourself from flying debris. Put yourself, in that spot there where you can, get that bicycle helmet, a football helmet, a baseball helmet, and then also put those shoes on. In the aftermath here, it would be so important to have them on because prior, you'll need it, you need them to protect your feet because if you have a tornado, walking around afterward would be cutting your feet up with that debris that's around in that theoretical scenario. As you see, the next 7 days of rainfall, we see quite a bit in it. As you're looking a little bit more showing up in some of this information here. Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, especially, even some of Arkansas, Oklahoma, maybe a more discreet accident at first, which is a problem. It might not have much rain, but tornado threat definitely there. Tennessee, you see West Virginia, quite a bit of rain for them. They're not accustomed to that sometimes. As we're looking up there, already had some bad, flooding towards some of those regions recently. Pennsylvania, some heavy rain, but our tornado threat's worse further back, as we were already highlighting for you guys. So, as we go ahead and say that drought monitor there now locally, bringing it to home, we did see a reduction in the drought here locally as we were tracking things, in general. a decent reduction, but we still have some issues, and it's dark, abnormally dry. Not as bad as it was, but you know, you look here and see a Marion, Putnam, and Flagler, and St. John's, a little bit of that area there. It's not, you know, an extreme drought, but we're talking about a severe drought still, so it wasn't really enough, and we're going to have pretty dry weather coming up. That rainfall forecast kind of highlighted that. We have extreme drought still in southwest Florida, so we did okay, but we could have done a lot better with the rain. You know, the water area, I know they did benefit pretty well in Osceola County, for instance. They're down to abnormally dry. They were having some wildfires the other day there, so you know, just an idea. It was helpful, but it wasn't enough. We need more rain here. Some areas like Lake City right now not in anything, which is really good, but we have to monitor. I know Marion, Flagler, Putnam, St. John's just still is not over here because I think, you know, we're not expecting really, you know, much rain here to the end of the month. That's a problem. It's gonna be hot. It's gonna be dry. Did you see our covered area always on pretty tornado warnings dumped into 62 counties? We're not expecting even much rain coming up. If we do get some, we actually could have a strong storm though. And, you know, a little bit of lighting there in southwest Georgia as we're looking around like Quitman County, Randolph, Terrell, Lee, Worth, Turner, somewhere up there, Ben Hill, Irwin, that vicinity, give or take. We could have a strong to severe storm on Saturday and or Sunday. That kind of pops up on us there in terms of being in our area. It might be from an existing line that comes in though, you know, that gets warning for some of those areas. But of course, we're in alert mode for national threat, though, but, you know, locally, still got to watch out for fog as well. Dense fog, you know, hazardous driving conditions, possible with low visibility. I know you got to watch out if you're going to the beaches as well. It's a little off topic, but it's, you know, something. And you got to watch out for those rip currents there at the beaches. You're trying to cool off from the heat. You're going to have problems. Fog, these are hidden hazards. That's why I'm kind of grouping them together. But really, heat, fog, and rip currents are all hazards that folks have, you know, had tragic outcomes with that you don't necessarily think about. They can all be deadly in their own sad ways here as you're looking at things. So, just got to keep that in mind. As you see the extended forecast, your very hot temperatures, drink plenty of water, and limit that time in that peak heating here. 5% chance around that Friday, so not too much. You see 20 Saturday, Sunday, that's for our Georgia counties, our far northern South Georgia counties, really. Saturday, Sunday, and then on that Monday, you see the rain chance dipping some, same for Tuesday, about 10%. On Wednesday, 40%. Thursday, 30%. As we're tracking things here. So you see some of those rain chances going up into the end of the period. You see the temperature trends, though. Those mid-90s for the next 5 days. That's very concerning and way above average. Record heat on some of these days at some of the locations for the daily records anyway. And those lows, you know, getting up there towards 70 by next Thursday morning in this pattern. Might have some cool air after this a bit, but, you know, this is very nasty heat. You gotta be careful with like softball and baseball games that are during the day. We have, you know, different games that are so critical here. I know FSU baseball, I didn't do too well, to be quite honest, on Thursday night against North Carolina. Hopefully for my Seminoles, they'll bounce back, and you know, but that was not a good performance, to be quite honest, there against North Carolina, as they couldn't get the job done, and they're number 2 in the country, you know, and we're going to be rooting for them, but they've got to improve as we look ahead. As we, you know, see FSU softball, I know they're in action. Roy, you know, hoping that they can have a deep run and not win it all here. As we're looking, of course, Coach Lonnie Alameda battling cancer there for the Noles, and a lot of seniors on the team there. As we're trying to see how things progress. UF, of course, they're going to have softball, and, you know, just folks going out to any of the events that are during the day here at the different locations across the area. Got to be very, very careful with that heat. This could be deadly heat, you know, and that heat stroke could happen. So make sure, you know, you're drinking plenty of water, you have that sunscreen on if you're out in this, but then limit time and peak heat. This can be dangerous. You know, the humidity's not as high as it generally is, so it may not feel quite as bad, but this heat is really dangerous. And, you know, you could really underestimate it, and then it could be really a tragic outcome here as we're looking at things. Haven't really been too hot, you know, to this level here in a while. Hottest it's been all year, and you don't want to be out in the peak heat, that is for sure. This can be very, very dangerous stuff. Again, it can be tragic. It definitely can be tragic if we're not careful here. Fog can be as well. Gotta be careful with that. As we're looking towards some of these mornings, some of these spots, and then the rip currents at the coast. That can be something you're trying to cool off because it's so hot, and you underestimate things here tragically, and then you get swept out, and you gotta try to swim parallel to the shore to stay alive as we're looking here, as we're tracking. That's the mantra there pretty much with rip current safety and the like. And I just want to pull up the exact wording from the Weather Service. They're talking about, caught in a rip current, don't fight it, is what some folks in the overall governmental agencies say. Swimming against the current can cause fatigue and drowning. So, you swim parallel to the shore until you feel the current lessen, and then swim to shore. And then if you can't break out of the current, flow with it until it dissipates, usually just beyond the breakers. So, with all these high school graduations coming up around this time, folks might be going to the beach to celebrate and cool off, and then our family members could be. And we really don't want to we don't want to have tragic stories around. Please, please be very careful at the beaches here. As we look at this, we just got the new update, and the stable moderate doesn't mean that much, and that for the national severe threat on that Friday, and that it could still get upgraded easily to high. As we look, they did upgrade the tornado threat to moderate, so that is something, that is, we've had that type of risk with deadly tornadoes in the area before, so got to be really, really cautious, really careful there. I'm going to go ahead and put that on the screen right now. You see that red area, that is a 4 out of 5 risk to tornado risk. You see that? That concentrates there from like Cape Girardeau and Union City over toward Marion there, and Illinois, and Paducah in Kentucky, and Madisonville, Kentucky, Bowling Green there, Elizabethtown, Evansville in Indiana. You see Lexington, Kentucky there. This could be a big problem here. That could be, this could be a deadly tornado outbreak, a deadly severe outbreak. There could be strong tornadoes, meaning you could have, probably will have multiple EF2 or stronger tornadoes in that hatched area later on that Friday. You gotta be prepared to get into your room away from windows where that basement is your best bet here of where to go. I mean, you even have areas like Nashville here in Davidson County, that metro area, under a risk for strong tornadoes on that Friday. They're under 10%, but in terms of this, they're under 10% for strong tornadoes as well. You see Cincinnati, Ohio, they're not used to dealing with strong tornadoes there, Southwest Ohio, that much. Occasionally, they had EF5 years ago, and I'm trying to pronounce this, but, well, it starts with an X. Xenia. I think I got that. Okay. Doing it off the top of my head. That tornado is so terrible there in Ohio. So they have had some experience with some terrible stuff over the years, but as we're looking, we just got to be careful. This is a time of year where we could have devastation, we could have tragedy, and we got to make sure folks are prepared for this threat. We're giving you the heads up now. Have multiple ways to get alerts. This hatched area, we could have, most folks, remember now, remain calm because, 98% of the folks are not going to get a tornado here, but some that do, maybe 2%, 1%, could have something really bad on their hands, completely, destroy their home, wipe it, where all you have left is the foundation. That's how bad. And a few of these areas, very isolated, but in a few of these spots, we could be seeing, just homes completely gone. All that's left is the foundation here as we're looking somewhere in this area. So it's not like a hurricane. Granted, I got to give it a caveat in that there's a hail risk here. We could have some significant hail, damaging hail anywhere in that green. It could be a problem. And then the wind risk is also a moderate wind risk here. You don't always get that. It's moderate risk. It goes all the way up toward, Arnold and Imperial and Farmington as we're looking there. Potosi. The reason for that here, as we're tracking things, as we're monitoring things here, is for that wind risk, and it could mean hurricane force gusts. They could be tornado-like. You've had hurricane-like conditions before in the Midwest, We could have hurricane conditions possible in that green area with the wind gusting to that for a short period of time in quite a few areas, maybe a lot more than where you have a tornado. Not everybody, obviously, but it'd be a lot more than where you have a tornado coming on through. So, real problem here in our hands as we look ahead. I mean, you see a slight risk all the way from Texas all the way, through the eastern seaboard. A 4 out of 5 tornado risk within this here. That's in the red. 3 out of 5 in the gold. Strong tornadoes possible in there, but that red is a real problem. The indicators with that, obviously, why was this is. That's what the problem is. The parameters are really coming together as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things. Could be very, very dangerous here in the meteorology world and the meteorology community. I know we'll be really paying attention to all this here as we look ahead and toward the timeline. So we're going to put the model guidance up. I know there's not as much as what the model guidance is showing right now. They try to do that compare and contrast, but we'll go ahead and progress this. 2 a.m. Central, 3 a.m. Central. There may be some development here. The more we get early on, it may keep things tame a little longer. Don't know if we're going to get this much development. That seems really aggressive to me. Doesn't mean it won't happen. In fact, let me do something here. We'll go to the more recent run, still picking up on this, but the 0Z is the extended. That's why I have to kind of scrub back. I know it's confusing, but this is 9Z here, 10Z, maybe a few warnings, a bit in the morning, or even brief tornado warning. Let me look. Yeah, brief tornado warning, I think would be the right characterization down there toward the boot hill. Those parameters are there, but not overly impressive, but enough to produce a tornado or two overnight. But that's not the biggest story. The biggest story is going to be during the daytime. We're going to have problems, based on the model guidance. And you see some of this hanging around more, that could limit stuff. But you see by around noon, it really starts to move away. And then we have a problem because we start to get things to break loose. 1 o'clock Central Time. I know I got to do my time conversions. I'm used to doing it for us. So 1 o'clock Central is 18Z. 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Central. You see some stuff coming over St. Louis, and then by 3 p.m. Central Time, it's moving on through, or just moved through even the metro area, or even the South Metro, according to this, as we're looking at things. And you see in toward Kentucky there, some stuff that's pretty nasty. You have a discrete storm there west of Cape Girardeau, give or take, at around 3 o'clock Central. About 4 o'clock, you see a couple of these. These could be tornado producers here. These hooks, I mean, that's terrible. See, and you don't see that in the modeling very much, hooks, as if, these are going to be tornado producers. Doesn't mean to be in these spots. They could be north or south within this for sure. And the parameters just a little south could be even more favorable for a tornado in this setup. You see some of these storms with hooks over here. You see some stuff with hooks in Kentucky there. Discrete storm north of Bowling Green and Western Kentucky University. Another discrete storm, but it may not be in these spots. You got to really just be careful. This could be a big deal. This could be very, very bad here. You see 4, 5 o'clock there. So this is about rush hour. This gets you to 22Z. That's 5 o'clock Central Time. And these could be in different spots. 50 miles one way or another, or one less of these. But this shows a tornado-producing storm moving right through Cape Girardeau or rush hour. Doesn't mean it's going to happen like that. It does not mean it's going to happen like that at tornado-producing storm. At rush hour, could be going through Sykeston, or it could be going through Perryville. There's another one that could be producing a tornado in this simulation. That's all this is. But it gives you an idea of what could happen. This could be headed right at rush hour towards St. Genevieve, a tornado-producing storm. Not out of the question. Maybe a tornado-producing storm coming through Marion, no way. Don't like those discrete storms in this type of environment. That'd be disastrous, possibly. 1 or 2 of these could take off into something that we'll remember tragically for a long time, because this is the time of year. I know we've had so many terrible tornadoes in the overall meteorological pattern. I'm not saying it's going to happen by any stretch. I got to be really careful saying this, because we haven't had an EF5 in over a decade, but this is the time of year you can get something like that here in the center of the country. It's a little east of where you would expect, but remember Joplin? That was about this time of year. More tornado. 2013, the last EF5. That was about, I think it was the 20th of May. So that stuff can happen this time of year. But an EF2, that can be deadly. An EF0, EF1 can even be deadly in a mobile home or if you're on the road. I mean, a tree falls, and this could be tragic here. Don't want to scare you guys, because a lot of areas you don't see rain even. But I want to prepare you guys. I mean, there's a chance this could turn more into a line If it doesn't, then there'll be less of the hurricane force winds and probably more of the tornadoes here and the hail, as we're looking at things. But more of a line, more of this big wind damage, but instead of peaking out with winds 150 miles an hour, give or take, we're talking about maybe peak winds of like 80 miles an hour. Both are bad, but 150 miles an hour, a lot more concentrated devastation. As we look ahead, you see these discrete storms. This is just bad. If we get stuff like this, we might have multiple tornado emergencies if we get the parameters to come together on. If they don't, come together on, then there's a chance we might not even have to go on the air. But if they come together on in this environment, we get all this discrete action. Because if it's hurricane force winds, that doesn't necessarily mean we have to be on for national coverage. It's not as big of a national story because you're going to have some problems. It could be very tragic in a few, instances. But if you have the tornado threat maximized, it could mean, swaths of total devastation. That means national storyline, a big national story for sure. But this simulation says at 7 o'clock Central Time on this Friday, could have a tornado producing storm there. It could be up, down. It may not be in this spot, but this is, just northeast of Paducah. And this example here, these hooks, this environment. It may not be as many as what this says, but one or two of these could be very tragic. See Louisville there, you see some stuff just north, but it could be in Louisville, it may not be, but we have to be really careful here. I'm concerned about this threat here, and they did go to a 4 to 5 on the tornado here, it's 4 to 5 on the wind. As we're looking here, you see all these storms, this is in later in the night, the parameters, wind parameters anyway, really hanging around in a very bad way as we're looking at things. I mean, we could be, pretty busy even, late evening there. Let's get you toward the southeast end of this. You see around the areas there in southeastern Kentucky and northern Tennessee. Could still have some problems here around midnight. And you see this progressing, and then you see this accident kind of is going to be weaker, but there still could be a few warnings with this. And this is what we have to kind of watch. It's a whole complex, not really a derecho, type of accident. But it reminds you a little of that. This is into the morning here on that Saturday. And you maybe see something that hangs together in northern counties. This says maybe around Cordell, just outside of the area. And then you see some stuff. I mean, that really fades pretty quick there. But my point being is we could have something that hang together all the way down in our far northern counties there. It's a long way, but be a lot weaker at that point, more than likely. See some lightning here in northern Arkansas. Could get a little bit of development here. There's some instability, some tornado parameters. So we'll have to see. The longer that stuff hangs around in the night, it may limit things a little bit earlier on in the day, but eventually it's probably going to still be a big problem here, depending on how the lid in the atmosphere, is impacted. That kind of tries to keep things at bay at first, but then probably won't be able to here, unfortunately, as we're tracking things, as we're monitoring things here in toward the weather center. And we already had a bunch of tornado reports on that Thursday. As we're looking here, looks like so far there's been 11 filtered out according to SPC, but it's probably been more. We had Minnesota there, debris reported. Wisconsin, a deputy reported a tornado. It was in, St. Croix County, Wisconsin, one example. Minnesota, Swift County, Minnesota, and then Illinois, actually, Grundy County, there was a problem there in the Braceville community. And then in Michigan, Eden County, Michigan, there's a report of a tornado semi-truck overturned. And there's a debris signature there. But, this debris signatures could be a lot worse in terms of that look on Doppler perspectives as we look ahead in toward the timeline. Just got to be very mindful of that here. Got to be paying attention as we're tracking things, as we're monitoring things here in toward the weather center. Just checking a couple more things here. We did get the day 2 Saturday outlook in, so let me go ahead and see that on our other source, the latest update. This came in here in the last little bit. So I'll pull this on up. This is for Saturday. Slight risk there, parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, a little bit of Louisiana, and then toward the East Coast. Tornado threat there in the East Coast region, but toward like Dallas is where it can maximize on that Saturday. The wind threat there, you see the yellow zones, you see the eastern seaboard could have problems. And then the hail threat is what could really be the damaging type of aspect with this from just south of Tulsa, especially to Little Rock, to Dallas, there in Waco, as you're looking there where that hatched area is. So that's kind of the storyline there right now. I think we pretty much covered everything we need to here tonight. But we'll be back as needed on Friday, later on that Friday here, giving the update. Might have to pop in sometime even in the afternoon here when we can really get things, developing in a very bad way, depending on if things come to fruition like some of the model guidance says. Could have a strong to violent tornado somewhere in that red area here on, and could even have multiple strong to violent tornadoes at some, point here within, especially this red area here where, you would kind of caught the meteorological bullseye here, unfortunately, as we're looking here at things. So, Cape Girardeau, Union City, Paducah, Marion, Evansville, Bowling Green, Elizabethtown, Jasper there in southern Indiana, I believe, and then Lexington, Kentucky. So, but you see Cincinnati and St. Louis right on the edge. And, Poplar Bluff, it is right here. Jonesboro, Arkansas, Nashville, Tennessee. Gonna have problems, potentially. Of course, Louisville. Can't forget about Louisville there. So again, just gotta really be mindful of this. We'll break back in. You see more lightning, so we may get some mornings overnight in the heartland. Areas like Cape Girardeau, south especially. But, the bigger threat's going to be later on here in the timeline. Big, big problems potentially in that red and even that gold area here. We really got to pay attention. Please, please have multiple ways to get alerts. Charge those devices up in case you lose power. I know a lot of folks in Michigan, I'm sure they wish they would have charged their devices up before the storm accent came in. This could be even worse here. Maybe a lot worse if we get destructive tornadoes and some areas here, you have 3, 4 type accent, unfortunately, in that red zone. Not out of the question here, even in the gold, but especially the red. As we're looking on that Friday, please, please have multiple ways to get alert. Charge your devices up. Even if you don't have a tornado, you might have hurricane force gust. So you're going to have to really be careful here. This is the kind of, going to be maybe day 2, I would say, of the multi-day event. Day 3 might not be as bad, or near as bad as day 2 even, but as we look ahead, and we'll have to watch towards Sunday, Monday, Tuesday next week, as we have another area coming on in to cause problems with the overall existing pattern that can be destructive, destructive in nature for sure. Please stay tuned. My thoughts and prayers to everybody there as we're looking toward that area, with the highest risk there. 4 out of 5, but even at 3 out of 5, we can definitely have big problems there. Things, they're not going to always be it. They normally aren't right in the center of the highest risk. I mean, a lot of times they'll be on the edge of something where the parameters come together. So please, please stay tuned. Stay safe. We'll be back here to the day and the days to come with more updates.